statement is what? Is a B. And now we're adding to it, which is an if-then statement that has a what? An arrow. Okay? Has an arrow. Now when we read the above, which is talking about this right here, it says P implies Q. That's what we're having. P implies Q. Or it could be if Q then P. Okay? P implies Q, or if P then P, if P then Q. The statement P is going to be the antecedent, and then the consequent will be the Q. What happens is this. If you have an if-then statement, and how you can remember this is really, really easy. How you can remember the if-then statement. Check this out. All of them will be true but one. This one will be true, this one will be true, and this one will be true. However, this one will be false. And the one that's going to be false, that's when the antecedent is true, but the consequent is false. So the whole thing is going to be false. So when the first part is true, but the second part is false, the whole thing is what? False. Other than that, all the other conditions are what? True. Okay? Okay? All the scenarios. That means if P and Q are both, if the first part is false and the second part is true, and both of them is false, is true. Talk about this if-then statement here. That means all conditions is true besides the one that has true what? False. That's it. That's how you can remember that one. Which means the first part is true, the second part is false, the whole statement is what? Huh? False. False. The whole statement is false. All the other conditions are going to be what? True. True. Okay, all the other conditions will be true. So when the antecedent is true and the consequent is false, the whole statement is false. All the other conditions are going to be true. And statement, both of them have to be what? True to be what? True. Or statement. One or the other or both have to be true for the statement to be what? True. Okay? All of these will be true besides one. And the one that's false is what? False. One P is what? True. And the second part is what? False. That's it. Okay? That's it. Here we go. True or false? Let's say that T is true, and we have 4, 2. We want to know if that statement right there true or false. This part is true. Is this true or false? False. False. So it says true, and it's talking about implies a false statement, so it's going to be what? False. It's going to be false. Based on what we have here. True, false, it's going to be false. Okay? Let's say that we have, this is A, let's do B. Let's say that we have A is equal to 1, implies a false. Is that going to be true or false? True. That's true. Because the first part is what? False. False. And the second part is what? False. So the whole thing is going to be who? True. Okay. And that's why I say, that's why advertising, when you start talking about advertising, that's how they trick you up. Doing stuff like that. Okay? Any questions on that part? Tautology, what we're going to do here tautology, they may be checked by forming a truth table. What happens is this. When you do your truth table, if all of the last column come up to be true, the whole thing is true. Okay? And that's what we're gonna talk about that later, but that's how that is talked about as far as tautology. Is that whole true value, that whole last column come up to be true, the whole thing is true. Negation of a conditional statement, P, if P then Q, to negate that if P then Q, then what you're gonna say is this. You're gonna say P and not Q. That's how you're gonna negate that if P then Q. To negate that, you do P and not Q. That's how we negate the if then statement. Okay? Writing a conditional statement as a or statement. Sometimes you might be asked to write a conditional statement as an or statement. To write a conditional statement as an or statement, then if you said if P, then Q, it's also equivalent to not P or Q. Okay? One is the negation of it, one is writing it as an or statement. To negate the if P, then Q, then you write P and not Q. That's how you negate your if then statement. Okay? Then if I want to write it as your conditional statement as a or statement, then it's actually not P or Q. Any questions there?
And that serves what purpose again?
Because I might have a statement that asks you to negate your statement. That's what I'm about to do now. So we are asked to negate. Okay.
What's that first word?
What? Determine. Okay. I want to determine the negation of each statement. Okay. And the purpose of this, and like he was asking, what is the purpose of that? Because you might actually negate a if-then statement. And to negate a if-then statement, you can't just say, if not P, then not Q. That's not negating that statement. Are you following me? To negate the statement, you have to write it as P and not who? That's why. Okay? Just because you said, some people still looking at me like I'm crazy. To negate a if-then statement, you can't say not P, if not P, then not Q. That's not negating that statement. Are you following me? Mm-hmm. You may think so, that's not. And that's why I said that's how people do advertisement. That's how they trick you up and you can't do anything, because they actually sit down and they look at the logic of this. Okay? And if they're actually writing the logic, and as long as the logic is true based on what they're doing, you can't touch them. So this is how they do it. And if they want to negate something, to negate a if-then statement, you have to say P and not who?
Q.
To negate that statement. That's the way you have to write that. Okay? So now, I want to negate this. If you ask him, he will come. Now, it says, if you ask him, he will what?
Come.
Okay, he will come. I want to negate that. I'm not going to say, now I said if you ask, so what I'm going to say, you ask him. Are you following me?
Mm-hmm.
You ask him. You ask him, so what?
He will not come.
He will not come. That's how you negate that.
Why wouldn't it be, if you ask him, he will not come?
If you ask him what?
He will not come.
Because you didn't negate that thing. It says, if you ask, he will what?
Come.
Now, what's your P?
If you ask him.
Then you negated the who?
He will not come.
You negated the what?
He will come.
You negated he will come. You changed that. You didn't rewrite. You didn't negate that. You changed what you had. Because at that point, you got P. You got if P, then you got what? Negation of Q. You didn't negate that.
Okay.
Okay? She... Okay? She just asked me, if I say if you ask him, he would not come. You didn't negate that statement at that point, because your P is already what? If you ask him, right? You ask him, right? That's your P. What you negated was the what? He would not what? So that means you didn't negate that whole statement there. Okay? And that's one thing about this, and I try to say this and I stress this enough. The wording and the language is the same thing using over math. Okay? And that means you got to use that math knowledge, which is the logic that we have, to negate it. And you got to say, you asked him. And then if you asked him, and negating at that point, because it says if you ask. So now we're going to say you asked, because we're going to change that. So you asked, and at that point you're going to negate the second part, and he will not come. Now let's look at the next one. So that was the first one. All dogs love bone. All dogs love bone. I want to negate that part. All dogs love bone. Love bone. Okay, I want to negate that. All dogs love bone. The first thing is that I have a dog. Say all dogs, right? Let's be specific. If it is a what? Dog. Let's be specific about that. It is a dog. And we're going to do that. It is a dog. And what? What about it? We want to negate it. It does not love bones. So it does. And we just negate it. Okay.
So you always changing the ending to the opposite?
We're trying to negate. No, you're negating this statement here. Here you're saying all dogs love bones. Going back, remember we saying when we had that negating all, we was actually saying some and things like that, right? You got to go back and remember what you learned. Okay? So here we're saying all dogs love bones. Well, I want to negate that. Okay? We want to negate all dogs love bones. Okay? At that point, we're going to say it is a what? Dog. And we want to negate it. That means that what?
It does not love.
It does not love bones.
How come we didn't do the some? Because it started off with all. How come we didn't say some dogs do not love bones?
It's not. Now I'm not saying you can. Now remember that you can change some things. It doesn't matter how you word it. It could be the same thing, just depending on how you do it. I said be more specific. If it is a dog, then it does not love a bone, because we said all dogs love bones. So we're just actually negating that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So when you, and the whole thing of actually making sure that you understand this is that the basic is making sure that your verbs and everything still agree. Okay. Also too, making sure that you understand how to negate something, because they will, and on the test I will tell you, okay, we have an if-then statement. How do you negate this if-then statement? You got to recognize that. Okay. Now we're going to talk about more conditional statements. One is going to be a biconditional statement. So we just talked about the if-then statement. Now we're going to talk about a biconditional statement. So now, before I go into a biconditional statement, let's just talk about this converse, inverse, and a contrapositive. So we're going to have a conditional statement. Okay. We know that your conditional statement will be your if-then. Okay. And that's that if P, then Q. That's your conditional statement. We know that conjunction is your and, your or is your disjunction, and your negation is when you do that. So we got a conditional statement, which is your if-then. We're going to have a converse. Your converse is switching these. It's if Q, then P. That's the converse. So it's saying if Q, then P. That's your converse. So you got a conditional statement that say if P, then Q. Then you can have the converse of that statement, which means it's saying if Q, then P. That's the converse. Then we can have the inverse. Now the other two is the negation of the other two. So we got inverse and contrapositive. All right? That is not P, if not P, then not Q. And then at that point, what we're going to do is negate the converse for the contrapositive, which is not Q. If not Q, then not who? P. So, if not P, then not Q. If not Q, then not P. You can just recognize that these mean not. I'm not going to put that in there. Just have to make it a little mark and say not. So you're going to understand that that's not. You got to recognize if it's going to be the converse, contrapositive, or the inverse, or however you have it, okay? But we already know conditional statements is if P, then Q. Then we got the converse, which means you're going to switch, have if Q, then P. Then at that point, the other two is the negation. And we're talking about the inverse. The inverse is not P. If not P, then not Q. And then if not Q, not P is the contrapositive that we have going. All right, let's say given this condition, if I live in Wisconsin, then I shovel snow. One, I want to make the converse. I want to write the converse. Then I want to write the inverse. And then the last one, I want to write the contrapositive of that. Then I live in Wisconsin, right? That's converse.
If I don't live in Wisconsin, I don't show.
All right? Not P, then not Q. So if I do not, if I don't live in Wisconsin, then I don't shovel snow. That's the inverse. Now we're not concerned about whether it's true or false, right? We're just writing the converse, contrapositive, or the inverse of that conditional statement there. We're not worried about the true value. I could ask you the true value at the end, okay? But right now we're not worried about that. We're just writing. So then the contrapositive will be who?
If I don't shovel snow.
If I don't shovel snow, then I don't what? Live in Wisconsin. Y'all don't remember that from geometry?
Yeah, I do. But it's
Geometry.
still hard. It's still hard.
It was confusing. So when you was in geometry, it was confusing because you had this if-then statement, and they said, well, what's the converse of that? Well, they didn't tell you. All you're doing is switching to what? The two component statement. That's all. You switch to two component statements and still make an if-then statement. And then therefore, they're talking about the inverse. The inverse is what? Negating that what? Conditional statement, right? If not P, then not Q, right? And the contrapositive one doing but negating the who. Well, it's not even really saying it's going to negate it, and you say that too. Because negating is different. Remember what we said in negating of an if-then statement, right? That P is not negated, right? Then we said what? And not what? Yeah, so keep that in mind, okay? So it's not really negating it, but you're just saying that we just negated both the P and the what? Q when we do that. So please make sure you understand that. So here we're saying contrapositive is just not Q, then not what? P. Okay? Everybody got that? Any questions? Okay. And if they ask you to negate the contrapositive, you got to remember that's something what? Different. And we know that when we talk about negating, and we just talked about that, what do we say? P, and we say and, not who? Q, right? That's negating. But that's what P and Q not being what? You got P and you have what?
Q.
Q, okay? At that point, if I'm asking you to negate that, and we looking at it, they're not the same, so it's something totally different. I want to pay attention to that, but we want to make sure you're aware of that. All right? Let's talk about equivalence. And then we're going to talk about the biconditional, which is the last one that you got to know. And then you're going to create your two tables. Are equivalent, which means it means the same thing, right? Then it says the converse and the inverse are equivalent. So they were saying those two mean the same thing, the converse and the inverse. Any questions on that? They're saying equivalent, which means equal, same thing. So they're saying that conditional statements, contrapositive, the converse and the conditional statement, contrapositive and the conditional statement are equivalent, and then the converse and the inverse are equivalent. Okay, meaning the same thing. Alternate forms of the if P then Q. The conditional if P then Q can be translated in any other following ways. And they were saying that if you said if P then Q, okay, can be translated into this point is P is sufficient for Q. So basically they're trying to say is you don't have to use if then statement. You could just say P is sufficient for Q, which comes back to what we were saying when you said all dogs, whether you're going to use some or all, this is the reason why. Based on that if-then statement. These are alternate forms of that. If P, comma, Q. You see that the then is missing. It just said if P, comma, Q. And it says Q is necessary for P. So Q is necessary, what? For P. So you got to have Q to have that P. Okay? Then it says P implies Q. Here it says all P are Q, which means that's what we were saying. All dogs love bones, right? When we turned around and we was actually talking about it, if I was just to write that instead, not even negating that and talking about writing it as a, because it says P implies Q, which then at that point it's that if-then statement. If P then Q. Then that means just that if it is a dog, it loves a what? Bone. Okay, if it is a dog, then it loves a bone. You follow me? So that's why we were doing it, that particular what we have going on. And that's based on the alternative ways that we have, all P are Q. And then it says P only if Q, and that's Q if P. And those all, and that gets a little bit wordy, and gets a little bit harder than what I want to go into with you guys. Okay? But that is some of the alternate forms of that. Now, what we do want to talk about, however, more is kind of your biconditional statements. Now, your biconditional statements are your double arrow. Arrow going left and right. So this is a biconditional statement. And it's actually going one way. Here you got the double arrow, arrows on both ends. That's a biconditional statement. It is interpreted as your conjunction of your two conditions, which means it's an and statement. You have to have that if-then statement of your P and Q, and then you're going to have the converse of that, which is actually the Q, if Q, then P. So that's basically what that biconditional statement says. It's the and, which means both things actually going to be applying there. So basically, you got your conditional statement and your converse statement, both of them being applied. That's the and statement of both of those. Here's your chart, your truth table.
We will always start our table off with those given true falses, right?
Actually, no, not really. Sometimes I will give it to you. Sometimes you gotta know it. And what it is all the different combinations you can have. Your P statement can be true. Your Q statement can be true. Then at that point, your P statement can be true, but your Q statement could be false. Then your P statement could be false, and your Q statement could be true. Then both of them could be false. And you follow me? It's all different ways.
Right. So, but it won't necessarily have to be in that order.
It don't.
Okay.
But you'll have the same truth value, whatever you use.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So whatever truth value you use first, it could be false, false. Now that same thing, no matter if I had false up top and you had false down the bottom, we still had the same truth value in that column. And that going across.
Okay.
No matter where I have,
Right.
it might be first for you, it might be bottom for me, but we have the same truth value.
Right.
Okay? Now do you gotta know what combination to use? Sometimes, yes you do. Sometimes I will give it to you, sometimes you gotta know it. Which means you're talking about all the different combinations, both true, both false. Then the first one might be true, but the second one is false. The next one might be false, and the next one true. Then I can throw an R in there. If I throw an R in there, then you're talking about, at that point,
Mind blown.
true, 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 all of them. We're talking about different combinations. Remember we talked about the different sets? Right? How many sets? Follow me? Talking about all the different combinations. That's what that's saying. Okay? Now, one thing about the if and only if, that's really, really easy to remember, too. If and only if, the only thing you got to know is this. Talking about the true value. They got to have the same true value for it to be true. So, for it to be true, they got to have the same true value. So, we know that the first one is going to be what? This one going to be who? And this one going to be what? But this one going to be who? Same true value for it to be true. That's how you can remember that one. So, if and only if, both of them have to have the same true value for it to be what?
True.
True. Okay, same true value for it to be true. Now we're going to practice with our truth table.